Okay, so chapter 7, we are looking at effective imagery today. So we're going to be going over chapter 7 and chapter 8 here. Chapter 7 is all about using visualization, right? So when we say when we're talking about imagery, what we are talking about is using your imagination to sort of drum up an experience, whether that's recreating an experience that you struggle with or trying to sort of forecast an experience that you might be dealing with in the future. Imagery can be a really effective tool to kind of help you build some psychological antibodies, similar to how we were inoculating to stress yesterday, right? So the idea is that if you have a stressful situation coming up, or if you're worried about something coming up, you can sort of work your way through that in your imagination so that it makes it more effective in real life. And we're going to look at some kind of the fun. This is, I've kind of talked about imagery a lot. I tend to mention imagery a lot leading up to this day because I always tell people it's not something that I'm particularly great at. But it is something that I'm super fascinated by, and I'm a firm believer in its usage. So it's kind of funny. This is definitely not playing. Using this technique is not really playing to my strengths. But I love it as a concept. It's kind of like I always tell you guys, I love meditation, even though I'm not a firm practicer. But we're gonna look at some really, really, really cool stuff about imagery. I'm gonna show you guys some really fun videos. Yeah, so we'll kind of go through this. First, I have to start with a not so fun video. This is our intro video here. All right, here we go.
Imagery, often called visualization, is a tool used to help performance and healing in diverse areas such as business, surgery, coping with cancer, military operations, and psychotherapy. Imagery can be used to improve exercise technique, motivation, and self-esteem. Here, you'll learn how to use it appropriately with clients in order to maximize goal efforts. Have you ever known anyone who avoids going to the gym or working out because they have imagined themselves looking silly or out of place? They are using imagery, but in a negative, destructive way. You can use imagery techniques with clients to help change negative and self-destructive imagery into positive imagery that provides self-esteem and motivates them to engage in physical activity. For example, should the client imagine from an internal first person or external third person perspective? If a baseball player is trying to imagine swinging a bat from an internal perspective, his image will be of looking at the pitcher. If he's trying to imagine himself swinging the bat from an external perspective, he'll be able to see himself from the perspective of another, such as the pitcher or a fan in the stands. Is imagery a skill that can be learned, or is it genetically based? Should imagery always be positive, or should people also imagine failure? Can imagery help quicken healing from an athletic injury? Should imagery focus on the feelings of movement or the environment in which the imagery takes place? These are just some of the questions that will be answered. The question is not whether you should use imagery, but rather in which specific ways it should be used to provide maximum effectiveness in helping clients with their exercise and eating regimens.
Okay, so I think we're going to get into the first video actually pretty quick, but let's quickly go ahead and define this. Sometimes you'll hear imagery referred to as visualization. I think I have the habit of sometimes using those two terms interchangeably. So if you hear me say visualization, that's another common way that this is referred to. But imagery. Imagery is going to be using all senses appropriate to recreate an experience in the mind, right? So when we're talking about this, we are either creating or recreating, actually. I'm gonna put that here, create or recreate an experience in the mind. So a lot of times this is an example of if you have a client who really tends to struggle, one thing that I talk to a lot of my clients who struggle with their weight, they'll have a really hard time in the grocery store. It's kind of a stressful time for them. And that's why creating shopping lists and things like that are so helpful because, that keeps them on task. But sometimes I always tell my clients to imagine it's okay, well, We're going to do all these different things beforehand to make sure that like there's no reason for us to fall off the wagon. We're going to go in there with a shopping list. We're going to go in and shop on a full stomach rather than shopping on an empty stomach, which has been shown to lead to people sort of purchasing things they don't need to or intend to purchase. And I want you to just imagine like the next time you're in there, you know, what are you going to do? Like, what's your backup plan? It's like, I'm going to take a second to just breathe and, you know, tell myself how I'm heading home. If I do like have like a hunger sensation, I'm going to tell myself I'm on my way home so I can like get some food there that I have control over. It's going to save me money. It's going to save me time. And I'm not going to be like falling off the wagon to reach my goals. And it's like, great. Those are all like excellent things. And so people can like sort of use this to kind of put themselves in that place. So the thing about imagery is that it is polysensory. It's polysensory. And what we mean by that, when we say polysensory, what we're talking about is it uses all senses, right? So when you're doing this, the most effective way, oh, look at that. Ignore. The most effective way to sort of use imagery is to not just conjure up like the images, right? But also try to like conjure up like what temperature it is, how it feels, how your emotional state, you know, what smells you might be around, or like, and then seeing yourself like from an internal perspective and an external perspective, and then try to do it at a similar like length of time that it normally takes. And we're going to see this big acronym here in just a second that's going to help us sort of remember how to recreate effective imagery. But it's polysensory. It's a form of stimulation, and basically you're just creating this experience in your mind. So we can use it to, again, like recreate. Can be used to recreate experience. Create experiences, or can be used to recreate emotions or thoughts. That's a really great one if you've ever tried to like just kind of deal with your own emotions or your own negative thoughts that you've had in the past. Imagery is a really great way to kind of work your way back and kind of process through that. A lot of times, like I know that if I've ever had like an argument with a significant other or something, sometimes it's always really helpful to kind of go back and sort of like replay that in your mind and be like, all right, where did this go wrong? And it's like, that's the moment that like really kind of kicked things off. And it's like, what I should have been focusing on was, you know, like I expressed my frustrations at this action, but what I should have been focused on is like why that action sort of occurred, you know, if somebody did something that was frustrating, you know. And so what's great about that is that can, you know, by recreating those emotions or thoughts, you're doing it in a place that you have a lot more control. You're doing it in your imagination, so you can kind of see how that plays out. So there's a lot of really cool stories out there, like anecdotal evidence of imagery's effectiveness. I mean, all of us have heard, I'm sure everybody in this call has heard like so many different times, like really cool stories about somebody like creating an experience in their mind and then like making it a reality, right? And that's like Phil Jackson was the king of that. Like he was really, really great at using visualization as like a tool and as a coach and stuff. And so he always like told people to manifest like a positive attitude because your attitude reflects your reality. You know, you hear that kind of stuff all the time, right? And so there are like a lot of really cool stories out there, but there's also a lot of really cool case studies. Like there's also a lot of case studies that have looked at people's behaviors slowly over time and how they've been changed just simply by like imagining themselves in one way or another. And then they've actually done like specific experimental studies where they've also kind of manipulated a group to kind of, you know, use imagery to kind of get one experience or another. So we're going to kind of look at one of those fun experiments right now. This is called, this video is The Scientific Power of Thought. This is another one of my favorite channels on YouTube. If you've ever watched ASAP Science, these guys are absolute rock stars. And so this is a quick little video that kind of shows you some really cool stuff about imagery and how they've been used in the past. So this is, I think they're going to use the term visualization. I'm not 100% certain on that, but This is very fun. Check this out.
For years, scientists believed that the brain was static, unchanging, and locked, but our understanding has changed drastically to the point where we now see the brain as plastic and constantly changing. But what if I told you that simply thinking could affect not only the way your brain works, but its physical shape and structure as well? It turns out this is exactly what happens. From a neuroscientific standpoint, imagining an action and doing it require the same motor and sensory programs in the brain. For example, if you were to close your eyes and imagine the letter B, the primary visual cortex lights up in the same way it does when you look at the letter on the screen. Take a moment and imagine yourself writing out your signature with your dominant hand. Chances are, the amount of time it takes you to simply imagine doing it is similar to how long it actually takes to write it out. Try doing the same thing with your non-dominant hand and it actually takes you longer to write and imagine. How is this relevant? Well, because imagination and action are actually integrated and engage the same neural pathways, practicing one actually influences the other. One fascinating study took two groups and had them practice piano for 2 hours a day, except one group was only allowed to use mental practice. They couldn't touch the piano, but would sit in front of it and imagine practicing. The surprising result? The exact same physical changes took place in the motor cortex of both groups. And after 3 days, their accuracy in playing was the exact same. Beyond 5 days, the physical practice group did begin to excel faster, but the imagination group, when given the chance to practice physically, was able to catch up to their skill level quickly. Perhaps more incredible is an experiment which used imagination in an effort to strengthen muscles. Both groups did the same bigger muscle exercises for 4 weeks, though one group simply did it mentally. Those who actually did the physical exercise increased their strength by 30%, while those who imagined doing it increased their muscle strength by 22%. This is because the neurons responsible for the movement instruction were still being used and strengthened, resulting in increased strength when the muscles actually contracted. So, while your thoughts don't have some mystical or magical power, mental practice is an effective way to prepare for a physical skill. Each thought actually changes the structure and function of your brain by affecting the neurons at the microscopic level. Though, as much as we wish you could sit there and become the next Mozart, it won't happen without a lot of hard physical work. But a little imagination never hurts. This episode of ASAP Science is supported by Audible.
So kind of fun, right? So there's some really cool, kind of interesting stories there where they had groups like try to learn piano without ever actually, playing a piano. And it was really effective. Now we're also going to look at how imagery can be used to enhance your self-confidence as well, right? This isn't only a that video is all about a lot of the fun sort of psychological and not psychological, but physical changes that we can make, right? Because we know that, like, and this is why this sort of works. We know that thoughts are physical things that are created, right? Like when I have like a thought to move my arm, right? My neurons start firing and they travel down a specific pathway until they recruit specific motor neurons that zap specific muscle fibers. So when I have like emotions or feelings or thoughts or anything, what that is it's a series of electric signals traveling down a very specific path. If it travels down a very different path, it's a different thought. And so because your neurons are physical, like things that exist, I mean, they're, you can hold them. When you like slowly create like the same thoughts over and over and over and over again, it burns in that path because these are electrochemical signals. And so you end up burning that groove. It's almost like burning a groove in deeper and deeper and deeper until eventually it gets easier to have that thought. This is kind of why like some of us know some people who tend to have the same type of thoughts over and over and over again. Like if any of us know somebody who's generally just kind of negative, right? That actually makes sense because like being negative can actually kind of change your brain, because like stress actually leads to you recruiting those negative neurons, and those negative neurons start getting used more and more and more and more and more, and it becomes kind of a problem, right? So that's sort of a little bit about like what we're looking at on the opposite side of the spectrum here. Imagery can be used to enhance your self-confidence, right? Can be used to enhance self-confidence, which is a big thing that we're often trying to instill in our clients, right? It can create these feelings, can create feelings of competency by seeing oneself perform specific skills successfully. Right? So like this can enhance your ability. Like once you see yourself doing something, you're likely to do something, right? This is again, sort of that example of like positive self-talk, right? So I want to show you one more video. It's all about how to practice effectively. This one is, so this isn't a video necessarily about visualization. It's not necessarily directly about like using imagery or anything like that. I mean, it's going to mention some of the similar things that we saw in the last video, but what it's really going to do is kind of talk about like how a lot of people don't practice in ways that are actually super effective for them. So if you want to get better at practicing for anything, any skill, these are some kind of fun lessons that you can kind of take away. No, stupid banner. Hold on. Zoom banner. There we go.
Mastering any physical skill, be it performing a pirouette, playing an instrument, or throwing a baseball, takes practice. Practice is the repetition of an action with the goal of improvement, and it helps us perform with more ease, speed, and confidence. So what does practice do in our brains to make us better at things? Our brains have two kinds of neural tissue, gray matter and white matter. The gray matter processes information in the brain, directing signals and sensory stimuli to nerve cells, while white matter is mostly made up of fatty tissue and nerve fibers. In order for our bodies to move, information needs to travel from the brain's gray matter down the spinal cord through a chain of nerve fibers called axons to our muscles. So how does practice or repetition affect the inner workings of our brains? The axons that exist in the white matter are wrapped with a fatty substance called myelin, and it's this myelin covering, or sheath, that seems to change with practice. Myelin is similar to insulation on electrical cables. It prevents energy loss from electrical signals that the brain uses, moving them more efficiently along neural pathways. Some recent studies in mice suggest that the repetition of a physical motion increases the layers of myelin sheath that insulates the axons. And the more layers, the greater the insulation around the axon chains, forming a sort of superhighway for information connecting your brain to your muscles. So while many athletes and performers attribute their successes to muscle memory, muscles themselves don't really have memory. Rather, it may be the myelination of neural pathways that give these athletes and performers their edge with faster and more efficient neural pathways. There are many theories that attempt to quantify the number of hours, days, and even years of practice that it takes to master a skill. While we don't yet have a magic number, we do know that mastery isn't simply about the amount of hours of practice. It's also the quality and effectiveness of that practice. Effective practice is consistent, intensely focused, and targets content or weaknesses that lie at the edge of one's current abilities. So if effective practice is the key, how can we get the most out of our practice time? Try these tips. Focus on the task at hand. Minimize potential distractions by turning off the computer or TV and putting your cell phone on airplane mode. In one study, researchers observed 260 students studying. On average, those students were able to stay on task for only 6 minutes at a time. Laptops, smartphones, and particularly Facebook were the root of most distractions. Start out slowly or in slow motion. Coordination is built with repetitions, whether correct or incorrect. If you gradually increase the speed of the quality repetitions, you have a better chance of doing them correctly. Next, frequent repetitions with allotted breaks are common practice habits of elite performers. Studies have shown that many top athletes, musicians, and dancers spend 50 to 60 hours per week on activities related to their craft. Many divide their time used for effective practice into multiple daily practice sessions of limited duration. And finally, practice in your brain in vivid detail. It's a bit surprising, but a number of studies suggest that once a physical motion has been established, it can be reinforced just by imagining it. In one study, 144 basketball players were divided into two groups. Group A physically practiced one-handed free throws, while Group B only mentally practiced them. When they were tested at the end of the 2-week experiment, the intermediate and experienced players in both groups had improved by nearly the same amount. As scientists get closer to unraveling the secrets of our brains, our understanding of effective practice will only improve. In the meantime, effective practice is the best way we have of pushing our individual limits, achieving new heights, and maximizing our potential.
So that's kind of a fun one, right? Like I love Ted did this big series of videos like that for a long time, and I think every one of them is awesome. But so that's kind of what we're seeing in the world of imagery, right? We're seeing that if you can sort of create or recreate these experiences in your brain, you're going to get better at sort of creating or recreating them in the gym. So this is actually the one version of this that I used to do like pretty frequently is when years ago when I used to do like a lot of like stunt work and stuff. One of the ways you can sort of memorize that choreography and like learn that stuff is just run it over your head over and over and over again. So I would always start in the morning by sort of running through things, and I go about my day and live my life. And then like I would always do it as like the last thing before I like went to bed as well. And it was a really effective way to kind of learn and practice that stuff without, you know, being, because we were only practicing once or twice a week, you know, kind of learning these big long routines. So that's a big part of like, again, using imagery, right? Like it can create physical changes, and those physical changes can affect your life in really positive ways. It can also be used, I really should, let's see here. No, I guess I don't have any better way of doing this. Another thing that can be also very helpful is it can be used, we're just using a lot of can be used notes, to enhance motivation as well. This is one of my favorite ones actually, but using imagery can result in new learning strategies to increase motivation. In sports or other activities, right? So you can imagine yourself like being healthier. You can imagine yourself being the best. You can imagine yourself succeeding, and that can sort of help you like stay motivated. And it doesn't always have to be necessarily that like you are just, you're not just going to like, when you're imagining, when you're doing imagery, you're not just like using this imagination thing to, practice, right, and get better at it. Sometimes, you know, you don't have to just sit there and sort of visualize things. You know, like an example of using imagery is like Michael Phelps. Like he did a great job of like using imagery because he programmed his brain to get used to the same action, the same routines before he ever like got in the pool. And so if you ever watch him, if you ever go back and you were watching him, he would always do like the same things before every single race. He would like sit on the diving board the same way. He would have his headphones in, and apparently he would listen to kind of the same playlist that he had been practicing with over like the last X number of weeks. You know, it wasn't just like he had his iPod on random or something like that. Like it was a specific playlist where he had been like practicing this, you know, 400-meter swim or whatever, right? And then he would do the same stretches for the same number of reps. He would do the same order and all these things. And someone asked him about it once. Like there was like I wish I could find that interview. But they're like, why do you always go through the same, you know, warm up? And he's like, because if I do that, I've already completed something successfully before I get into the pool. Like I've already like imagined I've already done something where I've won. So now I'm gonna like have that winning mentality when I get in there. And it's like, that's awesome, right? Like, so when you develop these like little routines, or where you develop these little like traditions almost, they're very helpful. So it can also, the two other big things that it can do, it can also enhance your controlling your emotional response, useful, oh my God, why? In helping control emotional responses. So if you are like a nervous athlete, right, this can reduce anxiety, positively arouse the active parts of the brain, and oh my God, and positively affect emotions, right? So there's a lot of like really positive stuff there as well, right? You can get yourself in that winner's mentality. You can get yourself in a sort of controlled state. If you're somebody who knows that they're kind of nervous under certain situations, you can kind of run through this in your head and sort of take away that nervousness by kind of imagining yourself in the scenario beforehand. And so that's one of the really helpful things. And then also it can improve concentration. Right, that's what we were seeing in the last video. They're talking about how like they look at these studies and they're like observing people who are studying for their freaking finals or whatever, and every 30 seconds they're looking at their phones. They're like they hear a bird or like what is that, like all these like different things. And so like by learning how to sort of like keep yourself from getting distracted, you can sort of like deal with your concentration a little bit better. And so it can help individuals focus their attention. You're going to get distracted still, I think. But I think the nice thing about imagery is that it helps you come back faster, So if you are trying to like sort of enhance like how effective you are at sitting down and doing something, imagery can be a really helpful way to do that. Just taking simple awareness of your own brain. So there's a couple different reasons why we think like imagery works, right? So ways that we sort of theorize about this, right? And so like how imagery works, there's kind of two big ones here. There is psychoneuromuscular theory. Yeah, that's definitely not gonna, that word's not gonna be in there. But psycho, oh, they kind of got it almost. Psychoneuromuscular theory is the idea that imagery facilitates learning of motor skills due to the nature of how the brain activates during neuromuscular patterns, right? So what we're seeing is basically what they're saying when they say that is like the brain fires in similar ways when you imagine something as it does when it actually performs something, right? Actually, we'll say perform an activity. Right, so your brain is actually going to fire in kind of similar ways, and so we see this with like innervation. Actually, have you guys ever been like kind of thinking about something, like just like laying down and like considered like thinking about a task, and then all of a sudden like one of your muscles twitches in a way when you're just like kind of going through that task? I definitely know that like I've done that like plenty of times where like I'll be sitting there and I'll be thinking about like an exercise or a movement or something. Or I'll watch like a video on like a new way to like sort of do a stretch or get into a certain position for an exercise or something like that. And I'll notice that like I will fire and shift because my brain is sort of analyzing and interpreting like what I saw in this video, and it's sort of like mimicking it physically because I'm thinking about it mentally, right? Like, so that's something that we see in psychoneuromuscular theory, right? We actually see those neurons sort of fire. And so that's kind of an interesting one, right? We know that innervation is like where your nervous system is sort of interacting with your muscular system. And so they've done EMG analysis where they've recorded like the electrical activity in muscles, and they've seen that electrical activity fire up even if somebody's not necessarily doing an activity. So that's psychoneuromuscular theory, right? The idea that the brain will fire very similarly to how it does during an actual activity. We're also going to see another one that we think is pretty common that kind of explains this phenomenon, which is symbolic learning theory. And this is basically the idea that imagery sort of acts as like a coding system. Think of it as like the Dewey Decimal System, right? Like in school, all of the books were arranged by, last name of the author, and then like if they, based on like whatever letter was first in the alphabet with the last name of the author. But then the next one, right? Like what happens if two people have the same, like if they both have the letter V in their last name for the first letter, well, then you go to the second letter. Then you go, like we all know that that's kind of how that works, right? That's like our system. So that's like a coding system, right? Like it's a coding system that makes it easy for us to like, I know the rules of how this works, and so I can sort of navigate it really easily, right? or like a grid system, right? Like if you know that you live on a grid system, like New York City is great because it's a grid. And it's like First Street, Second Street, Third Street, you know, boop, 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 boop. And so like, there's actually one of my favorite, oh my God, one of my favorite stand-up comics, John Mulaney, has this great joke in his first special where he talks about how silly Home Alone 2 Lost in New York is. And he's like, I know it's dumb to do a joke about 11 years that came out, or like 20 years ago, but I wasn't a comedian then, so I'm doing it now. And he's like talking about how he's like, Lost in New York, what a dumb title. It's a grid system. Where are you at? Where you want to go? 11 up and 1 over, you simple idiot. And it's like the audience like laughs really hard, and he's like, it's a dumb joke, but like I have to do it now. And I just think that's like so funny conceptually. But it's true, like you understand a coding system, your brain can sort of like move through that system really, really quickly. And so we think that like, this is one of the reasons why imagery works so well. It's like your brain goes, what am I doing? Sports, got it. What movements are effective for sports? These, got it. You know, and it can move through things much more quickly and much more effectively. So you sort of code your brain in a lot of different ways. So it is imagery helps the brain coordinate thoughts, actions, and emotions into a coding system, right? And so this can help individuals learn movement patterns much more consistently and effectively, right? So that's what's kind of cool about symbolic learning theory. You basically start to like, you're like, okay, I kind of get how this sort of like works together. And very similar to symbolic learning theory, we're also going to have sort of the bioinformational theory. Yeah, that's going to be ignored as well. So bioinformational theory is that the imagery is a set of propositions in the brain, right? So this is basically the idea that your brain develops a sort of flow chart to understand and respond to situations, right? So basically, this is where, understand. So bioinformational theory is the idea that your brain sort of locks everything down into like yes or no questions, right? It's like, is this happening? Right? Is this happening? It's like, if this is happening, then we're going to go down this path. And it's like, boop, 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 boop. And it learns how to like move through that path really, 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 really quickly. So describing an image, right? You have like these different sort of propositions, right? These different like questions that you're asking. And so stimulus propositions are statements describing specific stimulus features of like whatever scene. So then your brain kind of has that stored. It's like, imagine yourself outdoors, right? And so you're like, okay, outdoors. What are all the things I normally do when I'm outdoors? I'm definitely wearing shoes, you know, which is usually going to give me a little more traction. You know, I might be in like a high light environment. So maybe I'm wearing sunglasses or I'm squinting. So like, it kind of like runs through all those information, all that information really, really quickly. It's like, it's honestly, it's like when you fill out like an online quiz, you know, it's like, or when you use like an online calculator, like we were talking about like finance stuff a little bit yesterday. And it's like, you're trying to figure out like how much you think you could possibly get like a home loan for. It'll be like, how much money do you make per year? And it's like, click, click. And that's like, and it opens up all your options. It's like, okay, are you single? And it's like, click, click. And it opens up even more, you know, different options. It's like a flow. It's similar to like that flow chart that we're talking about. And then you're also going to have like response propositions, which are similar, but these describe like your physiological and emotional responses. And so this is where you're actually recreating your own like physical or emotional state. Like, are you, you know, calm? Are you stressed? Like how are you feeling, right? So we think that like those three things in particular are sort of why imagery is so effective, because it recreates these experiences. And then all of your neurons are like, what is this real? I guess we'll fire the same way we normally do, you know? So how do we actually use this, right? So now that we kind of know that it's a thing and that it's effective, how do we use it effectively, right? Well, this is where we are going to look at things like exercise technique, right? So exercise technique is really helpful when you're trying, or imagery is really helpful for developing exercise technique. So by more frequently imagining specific exercises, right? Watching videos, creating those healthy obsessions that we talked about, is really helpful. It can help improve even your appearance by just like alleviating anxiety about your appearance. Sometimes like we have these irrational beliefs about how we look or how we perform sometimes. And so like by recognizing that and like actually imagining, situations the way they are more accurate is definitely like a helpful and healthy thing that we can do. This is where you talk about like body dysmorphia, right? Like body dysmorphia is, again, it's this predisposition with like some perceived flaw that somebody thinks they have, even if it's not accurate, right? And so we can sort of use imagery to kind of help somebody come to terms with that and cope. We've also got like, we are going to see that it can improve all these really fun things here, right? It can improve your self-efficacy. Remember, your self-efficacy is your belief that you can achieve like specific tasks, right? That you can accomplish certain things, right? So that's what we're looking at there. So if you can like create like a plan, you can see yourself succeeding in that plan, and it actually makes you more successful in the end. Or like maybe it's like we want to use it to reduce stress or boost our energy, right? How many of you guys have been sort of like having like maybe a rough day, and then you just do this thing where you go, okay, I'm rallying, I'm good, let's do this, like I'm gonna rally, right? Sometimes it just helps to like say that, and so you imagine yourself having a lot of energy, and then maybe you don't, but you just speak in a tone that's similar to the last time you did have a lot of energy, and it gives you a boost of energy to kind of get through something that might be difficult. That's me every time I'm playing Frisbee and I'm totally like wiped out and just exhausted, like when I'm just like, man, all right, I can do this. Let's go. Played 4 games today already, every freaking tournament you go to. So how do we actually create, so now we got to be able to create effective images, right? We have to be able to sort of lead our clients through. We know that like we want it to be emotional. We know that we want it to be physical. Well, one of the things we're going to use is this big initialism here called PET-LEP. And so PET-LEP, which is kind of an interesting little acronym, but is going to be an acronym, that's hard to say, that, oh boy, yeah, that describes the different aspects of effective imagery. Right? So you are going to use PET-LEP to sort of recreate these experiences the way we want. These are all the things that are important in a good image, basically. So the components that we're going to look at, the first one is going to be physical, right? I'm actually not going to keep doing that. Physical is going to be the image conjured should closely approximate the actual motor preparation and execution. And this makes sense. Like basically, like if you want to get better at playing the piano, you need to imagine yourself playing the piano. Like that's what we're saying when it says physical, right? We want to imagine like physically something that's similar, right? Don't get me wrong, there's some carryover and things that are not exactly similar. Like there's carryover where like maybe you're trying to get better at the piano, so then you do like a specific exercise, or maybe you're trying to get better at playing like a specific song on the piano, but rather than play that song, you sort of practice with a specific variation that's somewhat similar, using some of the same keys, but not all of the same keys. That's super similar. But I will say, be cautious about like, trying to transfer your skills. Like we've seen how, like what I just described, like if you're trying to get better at the bench press, right? We've seen that doing a chest press can effectively like enhance that, right? But I caution you from getting too far away from whatever image or whatever physical task you're actually trying to practice. There's definitely value in doing things that are similar but different, but it's a kind of a dangerous road because like you can get too far off and then it doesn't, you're just wasting your time at that point. Like push-ups will not help you with a bench press. They're just very different exercises, even though they're both for your chest, and that's why like a lat pull down actually really does not help when it comes to like pull-ups. I know it sounds surprising because they look so freaking similar, but there's so much more core activation in a pull-up and there's so little core activation in a lat pull down that it has been shown to be almost like totally not, it didn't even transfer over. If you do want to make a lat pull down more similar to an actual pull-up, do it while kneeling on the ground. Like take yourself back and like kneel and do that pull down so that you're not like locked into the chair, and that will turn your core on, and now it's somewhat similar. Fun little weird fact for the day. So physical, right? So the image should be conjured up, should be similar to the physical environment, right? Then we've got the actual environment, right? Right, which is the image should take place in an environment that is similar or familiar to the physical environment of the activity. Right. So this is where like when you're conjuring up, like you want to do something similar to the physical like nature of what you were doing. And now the environment that you're in, you also want to make sure is the same environment. So like, again, if you're trying to get better at like maybe hitting a baseball, right? Physically, you should imagine yourself trying to hit a baseball, and the environment you should be in should be like behind home plate, that's what we're going to see there. We've also got task. Task is going to be the imagined task should reflect the actual task and the expertise of the performer. So this is where, like, again, let's go back to the baseball analogy. Your task should be similar to whatever it is you are trying to achieve. If you've never hit a home run before and you've never even gotten close, you should not try to imagine yourself hitting a home run. You know what I mean? Just because like that's not your level just yet. So instead, imagine doing something somewhat similar to what you've done, but maybe just a slightly more advanced version, right? Then you can kind of work your way up to that. It should reflect your expertise. Like if you're trying to get better at like basketball, right? Again, going back to like the physical, right? You want to imagine yourself like physically holding a basketball, and your environment should be on a court, and your task should be like, let's say you're trying to like enhance your shot, right? You should imagine yourself making those shots. Your task should not be like dunking a basketball. As cool as that would be, right? That's not what we're necessarily working on right now. So your task should reflect the actual task that you're working on. It should also reflect, your level of skill. So you should be shooting that, from the free throw or the three-point line, not the half-court shot, And then we are also going to see timing. This is the one that I have the hardest control over, actually, personally. This is timing. The imagined experience should take the same amount of time to perform the actual skill. So this is where, like, when it comes to timing, like, the double T here, your task should be the same task, your timing should take the same time. Remember in the first video where we were talking about how like it takes just as long, it takes you about as long as it takes to write your signature with one hand, and then it takes you longer with the other hand, right? Like even though you're only imagining it, but like you're just not as coordinated with your left, or if you're left-handed, not as coordinated with your right, right? So your timing of your imagined event, you shouldn't be rushing through it. This is something that I tend to struggle with, is I tend to rush through things when I imagine them. So you want to make sure that your timing is somewhat similar. Learning, this is a fun one. Your learning should affect, again, be related to your stage of learning. So this is kind of similar to task in a lot of ways, right? Like the learning should be into whatever stage. If you're a beginner, you should be focusing on beginner skills. If you're advanced, you should be focusing on advanced skills. But the image should match the performer's stage of learning, right? Again, like if you've got a client who's just trying to learn how to exercise regularly, right? This is one of the reasons why I say, I just want you to focus on showing up for your appointments on time. Like, imagine that for now. Well, imagine like, you know, doing a 135-pound bar on your back box jump later. And lastly, I'm sorry, not lastly. The next one we've got is emotions. This one's a little bit different, but this is where your emotional state should be similar. The imagery should reflect a similar emotional state. And that way, like, you can sort of further enhance that or learn how to control your emotions. Like if you tend to be very nervous or anxious, this can be really great because it can kind of help you overcome that. And lastly, this is the weird one, perspective. So perspective is unique. Perspective has two parts to it, but the imagery, oh my God, performed should be from an internal or external point of view, right? So when we're looking at this, right, this is what we're talking about with perspective. You're going to have two different versions here, right? If it's an internal perspective, right, that is going to be imagery. Oh my God, stop it. Imagery performed from one's own viewpoint, right? So your internal imagery is basically like you are imagining a situation as you are doing it from the first person, right? So basically, there's a first person viewpoint. You're just seeing it through your own eyes as if you're recreating that experience. External imagery is also really helpful. And this is where you are going to imagery performed from an outside perspective, right? So you are watching perform an activity. Right, so you are watching yourself perform that activity versus like you are doing that activity, right? So that's that right there is the pet lep. Whoa, come on now. That's what we're seeing with these. All right, so those are all the like kind of different parts. So now let's imagine that we kind of go through this acronym here, right? So if we were trying to get our client to sort of recreate some type of experience, right? We're trying to, I don't know, let's say, yeah, let's say we're going to teach our client how to perform like a really effective barbell squat, right? Maybe they've been struggling in the past with like, you know, movement compensations and things like that. So we're going to use imagery to sort of help them sort of recreate an effective barbell squat. So physically, we want them to be like, all right, so we're going to perform this barbell squat. I want you to imagine yourself stepping under the bar, placing that bar on your upper back, right? And I want you to imagine where you are placing that bar, right? We're going to put it right on the spongy part of our traps so that it's comfortable, and that we're also like loading it. Now, we want to do a high bar position, so I don't want you to be above that knob, but I want you to imagine it just below that on the meaty part of your neck, but not so low that your arms have to like take too much pressure, right? And we're just going to use a high bar position because maybe that's our client has tighter like hamstrings, right? So a high bar position works really well. If they have really tight hip flexors, a low bar position is going to work really well. We'll get into that in the sports class. But then we're going to imagine the environment. So like we've already put them in the right physical position, but now it's like, okay, now remember you're on the gym floor, right? Because you're on the gym floor, what's the environment like? Like, what does it smell like? What does it sound like? How many people are around you, right? We also want to then imagine the actual task. So while they're doing this, like we want to imagine like, all right, we're not going to say, okay, you get 400 pounds worth of plates on your sides, right? We're going to say, okay, we've got maybe our body weight, right? So this is going to be a body weight barbell squat, which is like a big moment for someone, right? Like the first time they ever get to do their first body weight barbell squat. It's kind of like, this is like a moment that this is like a weird shared moment that every guy has created and made a big deal out of. But every guy who gets their first like 135 bench press, like the first moment you get to use the 45, it's always like a special day for a lot of people. And then like the first 225, right? That's so funny to me that there's this weird unwritten rule of like how much we should all be able to do, even though we're all individuals. But anyway, so we go back. It's like, all right, this is the moment, right? This is the moment you're gonna do this, right? So we have them imagine like a specific environment, and when the task is, you know, specifically what task we're trying to perform. We're not trying to have them do, you know, more than their body weight. We're just trying to. It's like this is what we're trying to accomplish today. So I want you to imagine when you're going through this, it takes a similar amount of time to do, right? We're going to go through, I don't want you to rush through it, right? It's a 2-second tempo on the way down and then explode back up, right? The learning should match their stage of learning. So I chose this imagery, right? Rather than, you know, I want them to focus on like doing the bounce of the bottom, right? I didn't say do like an advanced, super fast eccentric technique, right? We controlled it on the way down because this person's somewhat of a beginner, rather than like a super explosive squat that's like a little more advanced for like a power lifter. So we made sure the learning was in their stage of learning. And then it's like, all right, now imagine like, you know, what this is gonna be like. Are you gonna get anxious on the way down? Are you gonna get nervous? Or you feel like you're not gonna be able to get all the way up? I want you to imagine those feelings coming up and then overcoming those, right? Like imagine that nervousness that you sometimes feel when you're in the bottom. You're like, am I gonna be able to get, you know, am I gonna be able to press this freaking thing up or not? Or am I gonna get stuck down here, you know? Am I gonna have to use the safety bars? Imagine that anxiety and overcome it. You are going to succeed in this image that we're creating, but I want you to conjure up those feelings. And then perspective wise, it's like, I want you to imagine yourself doing it. Then I want you to replay it and go all the way through the whole thing again. And it's you just standing outside the barbell rack, watching yourself do this, right? So that's kind of what we sort of imagine. A lot of times when you're doing PETLEP, you'll end up running your client through it twice, once from the internal and once from the external. And that's sort of the best way to kind of help your clients sort of evaluate that. And then what we're going to do afterwards is we're going to interview our client. I mean, we can't see inside of our client's imagination, but we're going to ask them questions and evaluate their imagery. Like, how effective was it, right? So we assess their current imagery skill by asking them a series of questions, right? So did you have like a lot of vividness, right? Like, were you employing like a lot of specific detail, right? And then like your client's like, oh yeah, like I imagined, you know, there was like a, you know, one of the things in my image was that when I stepped out from under the bar, I had some chalk on my upper back from the last person that was on the bar. And it's like, dang, that's very nice. You know, like that is super detailed. Good job, you know? So there's some great vividness. Or like I smelled the metal bar, I smelled the gym, you know, and I heard some guy screaming in the background, you know, like awesome. Those are all the kind of things that we want to have. And then, and this is the one that I tend to struggle with, my imagination loves to run away with me. But like your controllability, did you have controllability in all those aspects, you know? Or all of a sudden did Spider-Man bust through the ceiling and be like, we're going on an adventure, and then you found yourself downtown, you know? That's a severe exaggeration of controllability. But like, did you control your speed, right? Did you, oftentimes the best way to tell if you're controlling it, this is my opinion, but the best way to tell if you're controlling it effectively is, did your timing shift or did your perspective shift? A lot of times, I'm very good at imagining myself externally, but I'm kind of not that great at putting myself in my own brain and re-seeing things the way that I saw them before, which is kind of funny. But like sometimes like my controllability will shift whenever I'm trying to like, you know, mentally go through something. I'll be like, crap, you know, I ended up back in the external, you know? And so like going more inward again is sometimes difficult for me. Which is why, again, like I was mentioning, like PETLEP is helpful and it's a great, you know, constructive thing, but it's not something that I'm particularly gifted at. This is not the technique that I often use with my clients. But man, there's just so many cool stories about how effective it is. And I've known so many trainers who are just great at this, you know? I do like to, the most I use imagery, I like to have my clients when they're getting ready to do a sprint, I'll often like do like a big spiel during the recovery period. Like maybe we're doing all these different sprints, and it's the last sprint of the day that we're about to go through in like an interval class or something. And I'll be like, all right, we're about to go through our last one. I want you to imagine yourself doing something you've never done before. 0.1 faster on the treadmill, 1 more incline, 2 levels up on the resistance, or maybe just doing the freaking exercise with a smile on your face. Just everybody in here do something you've never done before and push yourself as hard as you can on this last set. Last one, best one, right? And I want you to imagine, and so I'll amp it up in the maybe they're doing a 2-minute recovery, so I've got 2 minutes of time to kind of like talk and motivate them. And then one of my favorite things to always say is, and I've had clients like say, man, that's such a motivating thing, is just like imagine your future self. Your future, like this next 2 minutes is gonna suck, and right now you're probably getting anxious about how hard it's gonna be, and that's totally okay. But imagine yourself in 6 months from now when you look back and be like, that was a piece of cake. Thank goodness my past version of me worked so hard, because now future version of me gets to enjoy and reap all the benefits, right? Imagine how your future you is going to thank the past you, rather than future you going, dang it, past me, I always yell at past me sometimes. Past me loves to screw future me over. Dang it, past me, buying that freaking thing off Amazon. Future me can't, or present me can't buy what I want to buy. That guy's got a spending problem. So let's go ahead and look at some of the ways we can also use this. These are some really great things. I just realized I used a little bit of imagery yesterday because I used a recording device. I was having a little bit of trouble on my squats yesterday. And I was like, what is going on? And I noticed I was just shifting forward more. And I was like, holy crap, my calves are tight. And so I took a minute before my last set to kind of extra stretch out my soleuses, and then my squat was fixed. And I was like, thank you, modern technology phones, for being able to record things that I can't see or feel. But here's some elements to imagery that are really effective. Practice is obviously huge, right? Literally just practicing and going through actions over and over again. Sound like Allen Iverson. Practice? We're talking about practice? And then using coping imagery, that's another one, right? Prepare yourself for certain possibilities. This is my favorite example of coping imagery. Nicholas, Raul, Robert, tell me if you guys do this, and to help me understand if I'm a crazy person or not. But do you ever win arguments in the shower before you know you're gonna have a conflict with somebody? I do this all the time.
I might have done it once.
Yeah, I do this all the time where I'm like, man, I need to talk to so-and-so about this thing that's bothering me. And then I'll be in the shower and it's like, if they say this, I'm gonna say this. And if they say this, I'm gonna counter with that. I go through it. It's nice because then I don't lose my temper when I'm in this argument. But yeah, that's coping imagery. You're learning how to cope ahead of time. Or maybe just learning how to cope afterwards, right? That's also coping imagery. But then I'd say the most common, which is weird to say because now we have so much access to phones and stuff. But now, I remember how cool it was playing sports and stuff and being able to see yourself on film and looking at the tape. That used to be difficult to do. Now it's just we can do it like that, which is crazy. And it makes you sound like an old fogey, but it's cool. And that's where recording devices come in, right? That enhances your vividness, it enhances your clarity, and can be used to boost your confidence. You're look at how excellent you were during the, look at how quickly you rotated during that hit or something, right? So those are all the different pieces of our imagery, and that's how to sort of use it in general. Now let's go ahead and take a look at how to use it with our clients in whatever stage of learning they happen to be in, right? So if you got a client who's in the pre-contemplation stage, again, these people are really not focused on, somebody who's in the pre-contemplation stage is somebody who's not thinking about changing. So you're not gonna be able to sit down and be like, all right, let's walk through a 10-minute imagery exercise. They're gonna be like, no. But you can still use imagery with this person by simply telling similar stories or asking them to imagine themselves in the future, just in one sentence, right? So if you're using similar stories, right? Have a client recount I'm sorry, recount like similar experiences to your clients to like sort of motivate them, right? And be like, yeah, well, I had somebody who's in a very similar situation to you. They were dealing with this, they were dealing with this. They had a slow thyroid. They had a fast metabolism their whole life. They were skinny, all these like different things. And then like they figured out like, the moment that really clicked for them was, and then you lay it out, right? Love telling stories. This is one of my favorite things to kind of do to motivate people is like someone will tell me something and my brain is constantly scanning for some type of parallel in an experience that like I've had in my life or a client has told me they've had in their life, some type of similar thing to sort of help somebody connect. So that's a great way with the pre-contemplation stage, because then it's like, again, we're trying to get somebody to see that it's possible or see the benefits. And it's like, that person's way happier now. And I'm like, they start to see it, right? Contemplation, somebody who is thinking about changing in the far or distant, in the distant future, right? So this is somebody who, one of the ways you can kind of help somebody with this is learn how to overcome their greatest barrier, because this is specific to them, right? Before we were helping somebody imagine like a healthier lifestyle in general. This is like, let's imagine like you in this healthy lifestyle. Like what's something you are struggling with right now? I always think of the example I always see whenever you watch like those motivational, if you ever watch like motivational talks or anything like that, they always pull a couple people out of the audience and like, what are you struggling with? And they're like, I struggle with this. And it's like, I want you to imagine yourself here. And it's like, how has this helped you? And they're like, it's helped me in these ways. And then the rest of the crowd is like, yeah, like this guy gets it, like that's kind of a way of like the contemplation stage. It's like, instead of just like imagining better in general, let's imagine better for you, better specifically, right? And then again, we got the preparation stage. This is where you're mostly going to get most of your new clients. And this is where it's like, you want to imagine your client, you want to get your client to imagine like everything going right over the next month. And so it's like, all right, this is what I like to call forecasting, actually. You'll sometimes hear forecasting in the world of sales, but I like to call this like forecasting in your sessions, where it's like, all right, you just got your 12 sessions. We're going to meet on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So I will definitely see you on Monday, right? And I want you to just kind of keep in mind, it's like birds fly, fish swim, grass is green, sky is blue. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, we always meet 6 a.m., right? These are just facts. They're not decisions that you have to make. The decision, you already made the decision earlier. All you have to do is show up. All right, so keep that in mind all week, right? And that kind of like gets them amped up, and they're like, yeah, right, like I knew I'm gonna kill it on Monday. And they just get really excited for that Monday session. Then you wreck their body, and then they hate you by the Wednesday session, but that's another story. You always get those text messages like, I can't get off the toilet and it's your fault. Sorry, not sorry. Next one we got is the action stage. This is somebody who actually has like sort of been working with you lately, right? This is where we want to kind of imagine, honestly, this is actually what yesterday's video was about. We were looking at like the daily grind, right? Part of that video yesterday was talking about how sometimes we lose motivation in the daily grind. Sometimes we lose motivation when not every single experience in our life is totally unique. It's like, oh, this is the same thing I did last time, and we get tired of it, There are times where like, I love doing my meal prep, or at least I love having my meal prep. But there are definitely times on a Sunday where people are like, we're going to the beach. And I'm like, I wish I would have known we were going to go to the beach. I would have gone shopping earlier. I don't have time, and it's like, I got to like stay committed to this thing, or, that's sometimes like this petty frustration. And what I can do to like get over that is be like, okay, if I imagine like how long it's going to take to do this, and this, I can do that and still get back in time, or, so sometimes like, it's like, hey, you got to imagine these daily frustrations that are going to come up and how you are going to deal with them, right? Maybe you can make it up on the next day. Maybe you can, get your task done a little earlier and then go off and do your fun thing, right? And then also another good way to do this is also like, if you get clients in the action stage, imagine their next routine. Again, keeping people like into maintenance and staying on maintenance is all about like pushing them forward. So now you can say, okay, you've rocked this routine. I want you to imagine the next one, right? Great, you ran your 5K. Let's start thinking about that 10K, and that's really where we're going to see it here in the maintenance stage. And then, oh, look at that. They even use the next level. So somebody who is, maintain change for 6 months, but they're not fully, in like termination just yet. And so have them imagine what it looks like to take their fitness to the next level and say, okay, you've got that, healthy lifestyle. Let's pick something that's like lofty. Let's pick a stretch goal, right? Like, hey, you ran a 5K, that's 3.1 miles marathon. And it's like 26 miles, like that's a big jump. Shouldn't I focus on the 10K? It's like, no, I know you can focus on another 5, I know you can do another 3 miles. That's a fact to me. I'm curious if you can do 26, like that's where it's like, you hit them, like with something big and scary. That's great because like that really does push your clients to the next level. Hey, you squat your body weight, right? You started from being able to squat 135 pounds and we're up to 175 in just a few months. What if we reach for 2 times your body weight? And it's like, hold on, that's a big difference. And it's like, it's only double the weight. It's like, yeah, it's double the weight, but I had 135 free ones before we showed up. I only had to gain 40 pounds worth of strength. And it's like, well, now you got to gain another 175 pounds. Like that's a stretch goal, right? And it's great because those stretch goals, not only does it show your client that you have confidence in them, but it also gives them this big, crazy, almost insurmountable thing that they have to focus on, which means they don't have time to spend energy trying to stay on their old program. They have to stay on their old program naturally. And that's what's great. We put it on autopilot in a way. This is why I always like to tell people, like sometimes people ask me, they're like, how do you find the motivation to always get up so early and work out so early? By the way, I don't do that on cardio days, as you can tell, for those of you who saw last night's lecture as well. You're like, those are the same clothes from last night. It's because cardio days I go in the middle of the day with my buddy. But a lot of times people are like, well, how the heck do you, get up so early? And I'm like, it's not like a decision. Like I don't get up early as a decision. If I had to make a decision every morning about like what time to get up, like that would take all my brain would be so sick of making decisions by the middle of the day. If you were to ask me like what I want for dinner, it would overwhelm me. But because it's just a fact, it's the same time, like consistently, it's a routine, not a choice. Doesn't take any energy, doesn't take any effort. And that's where, that takes time to get to. That's not something that happens naturally. It's just something that's developed. There's actually, if you guys want to totally moving away from imagery and just talking about what I just mentioned, you want to ever learn some really fun, learn about some really fun stuff, check out, learn about like decision fatigue. Decision fatigue is a really fun psychological concept that I often also talk about with my clients. A lot of like CEOs claim that they're like all about understanding decision fatigue. But it's like, you look at like Mark Zuckerberg, he dresses in the same outfit every single day. Steve Jobs is the same way. Steve Jobs always had that same turtleneck sweater, and they ask them like, well, you get all this money in the world, why don't you dress more fancy? And it's like, these people have a lot of decisions to make, they're very like, they have like a million decisions to make every single day. If they have to spend time thinking about what they have to wear, that's like mental energy. And we know that like willpower and decision making are exhaustible. Like we only have so much willpower. That's what we saw in the marshmallow test. Like those kids who are just like, they're supposed to, avoid eating this marshmallow. But if they ask them to like do it again a second time, it's like exhausting. It's like, oh, I already did it once, and their brain is worn out. There's a really fun, I think I might have mentioned it that day. This is the last thing I'll talk about decision fatigue, because this is like not a chapter, but it's one of my favorite psychological concepts. They put people through something similar to the marshmallow test. And then they had them try to complete an impossible maze. Like they were like, here, we want you to go start to finish through this maze. And they were like, but it was actually impossible, like it couldn't be completed. And what they found is that the people who said, screw the marshmallow and just ate the one like immediately, they stuck to the maze longer than the people who like used up all their willpower, trying to like resist temptation. It wasn't actually marshmallows in that version of the test. But you know, that just kind of goes to show you that like we only have so much willpower. You got to spend it all to like try to get yourself out of bed in the morning rather than just getting out of bed as a statement of fact. You're gonna have a bad time. So let's look at our last chapter here. Actually, before we move on, do you guys have any questions about any of the imagery stuff? Any questions at all? What's that?
I said no, sir.
Oh, okay, fair enough. All right, so
Actually,
yeah, what's up?
do you ever use like imagery on like is imagery good to use like perfect to use for like kids that are working out?
Yeah, I think it is. But kids also like you can imagine these full-on like imagery exercises. They kind of take a little while. Like it's like you got to sit down and close your eyes and like kind of walk through this process.
Okay.
I find that that's really hard to do with kids. And I'll be honest, like we're about to go into the kids program design class this week. I don't have a ton of experience working with little kids. I'm not so awesome with little kids. I just get, it's in a weird way, I get kind of self-conscious around like little kids because I just noticed that I speak to them the same way I speak to like adults. And I'm like, man, I never developed my like little kid voice or my little kid conversation. Like I just didn't stretch those muscles growing up. And I'm still one of those people that like when you hand me a baby, I'm like, good God, don't break on me, you know? And then you got the parents and they're like, no, they're totally not fragile, you know? And I'm like, so I'm kind of like that around little kids. I get really nervous and but I have worked with teenagers, like plenty of teenagers where like usually it involves me like training their parents and then they're like, hey, I'd love to get my, you know, teen involved after school. I've done plenty of that stuff. So usually like 15, 16 or older, because most gyms require like 14 as like a bare minimum age. Most commercial gyms rather. So do I use imagery with them? Definitely. Like teens, it works really well. They've got just enough willpower to kind of sit through an activity and like you can imagine this. And so like a lot of times like I used to train these two kids at the same time. Like this one kid's mom, it was awesome, man. This one kid's mom paid for duo sessions and just let this other kid come along. And it was really cool. I was like, man, what a great freaking mom. Like, it's so nice. Like, because duo sessions are expensive. You know, you're paying not twice as much money. You know, they usually get a discount, but still. Used to love training these kids. They were both like basketball and track players and stuff. And so I would get them really amped up before we would do like a specific activity because we did a lot of like drills and sports stuff. So we'd go into the basketball court and I'd be like, all right, here's the drill. And I'd teach them, I'd be like, we're going to go, you know, this foot in, this foot in, this foot out, right? And I'd take them through like a speed ladder drill. I was like, okay, so close your eyes. All right, imagine yourself going through it. You are not going to touch the speed ladder. You are also not, this is a big thing that I used to have to, because they're teenagers and they're competitive, right? And you are also not going to sacrifice form for speed. I care way more about you making sure that you don't touch anything. So imagine yourself not touching that speed ladder at all. And then you're going to come back and get in line and I'd run them through the whole route. So they would kind of like imagine the route first after I showed it to them. So I'd show them physically and then have them imagine it. And I do that a lot with like teens and stuff. So long answer to your short question, but yes, I would use it with kids. I'd use it with teens. I'd caution you from using it too much with kids. If you're going to use it with kids, the most effective imagery is probably just going to be, you know, showing them like video of themselves rather than leading them through an imagery exercise. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, both those things are still imagery, you know, showing them something and then it's like, imagine you or this, you know, like that's still imagery. It's just not a guided imagery exercise.
Gotcha.
Okay, so interpersonal and social influences on behavior change. So now, actually, this is great. This is great that I just mentioned the boys earlier. Those two kids, right? They were what the reason, the mom, it was awesome that she did it. Maybe she just did it to be charitable and nice, but it was also like effective for keeping her kid motivated. They had a gym partner, and having a gym partner is a great tool, so we can encourage our clients. And this is where I'm not going to try to, sometimes I've pivoted really hard into like pitching to students the efficacy of like duo sessions and small group training. I will try to keep that brief, but I will say this: when we know that people who work out in like small groups are much more motivated to keep working out rather than just do it themselves. So we're going to talk about how to kind of enhance that. And this is where we in our industry, we have a lot of like money making potential while helping more people in duo sessions and small group training, where maybe you're training up to 4 people, and then every person that trains, they get a discount, right? But you end up making like more money because like maybe they don't have to pay $100 a session. Maybe they're only paying $60 a session, but you've got 4 $60 people simultaneously. They're getting $40 off. You're making $240 instead of $100. So like small group training is great. It's one of my favorite types of sessions to have. It is where I've made, that's not true. I was gonna say it's where I've made most of my money. That's totally inaccurate, but it's something that has enhanced my, your paychecks for years and years. So let's talk about why social influences are so effective. We're gonna talk a little bit about peer pressure, but in a good way.
Interpersonal and social influences can both positively and negatively affect a person's ability to meet their goals. Knowing this information will allow you to help clients identify, avoid, and create strategies to combat negative social influences. You'll also learn how to help them identify and seek out positive social influences to support progress. Keep in mind that a client's success is due just as much to the other social influences that surround them as yours. Motivation on its own isn't enough. Therefore, it's important for you to be aware of the different social influences that can affect a client's motivation towards exercise and eating behaviors. You'll be made aware of the different types of social influences clients are bombarded with on a regular basis, from advertisements on television, the internet, radio, billboards, and magazines. And we'll be able to provide you with strategies based on social influences to help your clients succeed.
Okay, so all right, so what the heck are social influences? They're not just your friends. They're also the freaking world that we live in, and that is sometimes the worst type. So social influences, elements that have positive or negative impacts on clients' attitudes and behaviors. The idea that you are supposed to look a certain way or act a certain way or dress a certain way or make a certain amount of money, all of those things are social influences. We are plastered with them every single day, right? You drive down the road and you're going to see a billboard saying like, you got to drive this car. You drive down a little bit further, you see a billboard that says you got to use this cologne, right? All of those like things that we see in our everyday life that tell us, this is what a real man dresses like, or this is what ladies, this is how you should look. Those are a lot of our social influences. But there's also, ones that we have a little more control over, like family, our friends, right? Like they say if you want to be, you should surround yourself with people that you want to be like, right? Like you should surround yourself with people that sort of prop you up. That's a big part of like what we're looking at in interpersonal relationships, right? So we got a lot of different sources of influences here. It can be family, friends, the media, and then obviously wellness professionals, right? So obviously we actually are definitely a social influence on our clients, right? So a lot of times when we think of like adhering to specific like social influences, we'll hear the term like social norms, but social norms are culturally accepted behaviors, right? Ways you're supposed to act. I just had this conversation, and this is a total opinion mode here, but I just had this conversation with my roommates the other night, because we had like a couple people over, and we were talking about how nice it was to have a few folks over, and we were discussing how like how you have conversations and like what those conversations are supposed to look like. And both my roommates were like, oh, I just hate having conversations where it's like, where are you from? What do you do? And they're like, I hate those conversations. And I was like, I was like, I love those conversations. And they're like, what? And I was like, yeah, I don't love them because they're deep. I don't love them because like I'm actually learning about something. A lot of times you have those conversations and you don't even care what the answer is. And like, in a weird way, if both parties are kind of aware of that, you accept the fact that like it's almost like a salutation. Someone's like, hi, how are you? It's like a handshake. Then that opens up the door, and that's what gets you to like a deeper, fun conversation afterwards, So yeah, those questions both suck, but like they're a means to an end to a meaningful conversation, and that's where like in some ways like I like certain social norms. I think social norms can be used in a way that's really positive. I just think that it's common that social norms are used in ways that are negative, right? A lot like when you're told you should dress a certain way, right? Or act a certain way, or you should look a certain way. I think a lot of times those lead to like negative pressures. And I'm not a big fan of that kind of stuff. But the idea that like, you have like the control over your own life and then you have the control to make your own decisions, I think that's really awesome. So we gotta like, this is where we kind of got to get into like our social support, right? And so like social support is definitely a big one that we are trying to develop, right? So social support, right? The perception of care received from others. I don't particularly like that definition, so I'm going to put it kind of in my own way. But social support is like the influence on behaviors from outside sources within an individual's social circle, right? So your social support is like the influence that your friends and your family have on you, sometimes that's very supportive, sometimes that's not. Sometimes your family does stuff and they want you to do stuff and you're just like, oh nope, not doing that. And that's okay too, as long as you're like aware of it and you have the emotional tools to kind of handle that. My parents don't exactly vote the way I do. And so like that's okay, right? But like this is where we still have like, you still want to have like a supportive relationship, and if you're not getting it from them, cool, maybe that's not awesome, but find somewhere else you can get it from, right? And so the types of social support that we are going to see are going to be emotional, instrumental, informational, and appraisal, right? So really quickly, I'm just going to pull these up in the reading. That's interesting. I would have thought these would be in here, in the notes or in the PowerPoint. I'm going to put these in your notes because these actually are kind of a big deal. So let's look at the different types of support that we are going to see here. So types of social support. I always forget those. So we're going to see emotional support. This one's probably pretty easy to understand, but emotional support is going to be actively listening and demonstrating care, trust, and encouragement, right? So emotional support is literally just being there for someone emotionally. Like you are there as a sounding board. That's really our main job through emotional support. And your clients, you're going to provide so much emotional support to your clients just by simply being their trainer. Your clients are going to tell you so much stuff, stuff that they probably don't tell a lot of other people because it's just this contained moment. And there's just something about exercising and building this kind of interpersonal relationship where someone's like, they really tend to open up to you. So, you know, sometimes like having your client just like open up to you and you just being there to like give them a high five or like, you know, tell them it's like, man, that is a really hard situation. Kill it on the boxing bag. We're going to skip our 2 minutes of cardio on the treadmill. Instead, we're going to go hit that bag for 2 minutes. You know, it's going to get your heart rate up just as well. And it'll give you a chance to kind of, you know, get out some of those frustrations. So that's, you know, that's an example of providing some emotional support, and you are definitely going to be a big part of that. There's also instrumental support. This one's easy to remember if you literally think of the word instrument. But these are actively giving someone practical resources, right? Instrumental support is literally like giving someone the instruments necessary for them to stay on task. You know, I know it's kind of silly for me to text you guys every morning reminding you that the 8:30 call is up, but I do it because, like, you know, that definitely takes away the guesswork and is like a good reminder. It's like, hey, this is the time, right? Every time. And so we all get into like sort of a routine about it. Also, sometimes Zoom acts like a freaking jerk, and so the call might go up a minute or two late. But that's like instrumental support, right? Like basically we're trying to like remove any of the guesswork so that like you don't have to actively think about something. It's just easy for you to do, right? This is why, you know, an example of instrumental support, you get your links in the email. You can always just subscribe to the YouTube and find it that way. It's on Canvas, right? Like there's 3 different places to find the handouts. There's 3 different ways to get the homeworks. There's 3 different ways to like, you know, get your notes and your PowerPoints and stuff. That's instrumental support, right? Your clients, making sure that you're texting them to remind them of their appointments, telling them specifically what part of the gym to show up on. Those are all like instrumental. Then there's informational, right? Informational support, which is kind of similar, but instead it's a little more like mental. But this is like information, advice, or suggestions in support of an individual, right? So like in this one, when we're looking at informational support, this is just you teaching your client something, or like giving them specific advice or suggestions, like, why don't you try this, right? We do a lot of informational support. That's a big part of our guided self-help principle, right? We know that we are guiding people by giving them information. We know that information pushes someone from the not thinking about it stages, pre-contemplation and contemplation, to the preparation stages and actually taking action. And then we've got appraisal, and appraisal is the fun one, right? But appraisal is feedback for evaluation. Sometimes you're just there to be like, hey, you're doing it, 3 more reps, right? You've only got 3 more to go. You've already killed 20, you know, you've already killed 27, right? Just that constant motivation. One of the ways that you can do appraisal is just using the tone of your voice while you're training your clients. I tend to have kind of a similar like shtick for all of my rep ranges, whether I'm counting up or counting down, depending on which way it's going. But it's like a lot of times you'll kind of get into the mindset of being like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like you do that your whole session, you're gonna go crazy. So it's like, that's 5, 10 more. That's 10. You're 2/3 of the way done. Last 5. You know, like little things like that. Those are like appraisal that kind of like, okay, that's right. Oh my God, oh, that's right. It is 2/3 of the way done. I'm almost done. You know, like I've already done twice as much as I've got to do at the end. Little things like that. You've only got 2 more, right? If you can do this last one, you can definitely do the next 2. You know, like little things like that. Those are examples of like appraisal, right? Or just like, hey, you crushed it on that set. That was awesome. That's also appraisal. So, those are sort of our types of social support that we're going to see. So as a fitness professional, our job is going to be, you know, to recognize whether or not our clients have a lack of social support. And if that's true, then we need to create strategies to sort of enhance that. And we can use our different social influences to motivate our clients, right? So fitness professionals need to recognize social support or its lack thereof in our clients. Oh my God. Just losing my ability to type. You know what it honestly is? I did some heavy deadlifts yesterday and my forearms are so sore. My hands are killing me today. It's making it hard to freaking type. But that's a big part. Like, recognize if your clients have like a base of support, right? Does your client have an exercise partner, someone to share their experiences with, right? Does your client like have some type of social support in their life? You want to ask yourself these questions to, see how hands-on you need to be. If they don't have somebody reminding them and motivating them to get to the gym, they might fall off the wagon. So we're there to be like, hey, just a reminder, you really crushed it yesterday. I can't wait to see you again on Friday, right? Little things like that, if they just don't have that good support. We can also create strategies to enhance that social support. Right? So like encouraging clients to share their experiences with others. So that's going to be a big thing that we can do with our clients as well, right? Is come up with a strategy, right? Hey, I want you to check in on this website and like post your results. Hey, I want you to join this weight loss challenge. Hey, I want you to tell your family about your success. Make sure you go home and like brag a little bit today. Those are great ways to like enhance social support. And then we can also use social influences to motivate our clients. Sometimes, I've said this before, but it is true. Sometimes you are nothing more than a glorified appointment. Your clients are going to show up and they're like, oh, I'm here because I know you'd be sitting around bored if it wasn't for me being here, but I do not want to work out today. And it's like, all right, well, I'll take it. Let's get you on the floor. I'm just glad you're here. Sometimes that's going to happen. Sometimes your clients will show up just to, be there for you as much as you are there for them. Which is great. That's the kind of relationship that you want. You are the peer pressure that keeps them on the wagon, you can also do that to like, this is another reason why I love small group training and duo sessions, right? So we can encourage clients to feel social pressure in a positive way to enhance target behaviors, such as coming to the gym. You create your tribe basically at the gym. And that's why that's like so helpful. So that's a big thing that we need to do. Now, like I said, we've got a couple different versions of social support. You're going to see two kind of common versions of social influences that people will experience, and this is something we all experience. But you're going to see informative social influences and normative social influences. And so a lot of times people's motivations are either going to be informative or their motivations are going to be normative. So informative social influences are obtaining the information in order to like help make a decision. So this is where like if you seek advice from someone else, you're like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, right? That's you seeking informative social influence, right? You're asking someone else what their opinion is. And then there's also like normative social influence, which is not necessarily that like you are even asking someone, but you are making decisions because like you're trying to make sure that you have like a sense of belonging to one specific part of a group, right? So normative social influences are like the reason all of us, might dress a certain way, right? In order to kind of fit into the group. These are influences we need to kind of be aware of because like you can use them in really effective ways, but you can also like recognize them if they're like destructive, like sometimes like your clients will describe like, yeah, I struggle with my eating because like everybody in the office is constantly doing this kind of thing. And it's like, well, remember, like, you're on like a specific journey. You don't need to like do that just to like fit in. And it's not like we're not in a weird situation where you're going to get bullied or judged for those. If anything, people are going to be impressed, happy that, they care about you. And so they're going to be happy that you're doing the things that enhance your life, think about all the times like think about all the times you've been excited for someone who's doing something that sounds really challenging. They're like, man, that's awesome, congrats. I love it. I love it when somebody like someone taught me this a long time ago, and I wish I remember where I picked it up, but I love saying congrats to people. Like I get a high from telling somebody congratulations. And so I try to say that as often as I can. When I hear somebody like joins the Sochi program and I'm like, why'd you join? And they're like, well, I've already lost like 150 pounds myself. And I'm like, oh my God, congratulations. That's awesome. Like I get to almost partake in that in an exciting way. And then it makes them feel really good as well, so that's kind of what we're looking at there. Now, when it comes to compliance, compliance is going to describe like, is your client sticking to the program or not? So a lot of why we're talking about social influences is because we are trying to find ways to enhance compliance. We want our clients to stick to the program because the program is what's going to be, what works, right? So compliant clients, it's always so hard to say. Compliant clients are clients that are following your suggestions, whereas like non-compliant clients are the ones who are showing some type of resistance to change, and they have low levels of adherence, right? So compliance, right, is going to be, or I guess we'll say compliant clients are clients following the fitness professionals' suggestions, right? They're doing their homework. They're eating the way that they're following the plan, right? Then we have like non-compliant clients, right, which are clients showing resistance to change. Now, here's the thing. When it comes to non-compliance, it should be noted that sometimes this is involuntary, or maybe your client is unaware of it, right? We know, again, that weight loss and weight gain, both those things are just simply an equation, right? We know that it's energy in versus energy out, but that feels very hard to believe when you think that you've stuck to a program exactly. And you're like, I stuck to the program, I complied to it. And it's like, the thing is, like, I just know that we live in a world with a set like law of physics, like it only works one way. And so because of that, you may feel that you're being very compliant. You may have tried to be really compliant. You may have worked as hard as you can, but just your perception's a little off, Like I said, I think I said this yesterday, like a handful of nuts is about a handful is about a quarter cup of something. But when I say that, obviously that's not always true. What if your hand is under the giant's hand? Or what if your hand is, very, very small, right? Obviously those numbers are messed up. So when you follow a program that says have a handful of nuts at a certain specific time, maybe that doesn't give you enough energy, and that's why you're getting hungry and falling off the wagon later in the day. Or maybe your hands are really big and that gives you too much calories, and now you're not, meeting your energy balance. So non-compliance doesn't just mean somebody who's like, I don't want it. Right? It's not somebody who's just not sticking to the program. It's not a sign of low willpower. It's not a sign of anything. It's just a sign of like low adherence for whatever reason. And that's where we see adherence here. Adherence is basically compliance. They're giving them two different definitions. Adherence, right? The adoption of healthy behaviors, right? So if you're actually adhering to the program, you are being a compliant client, right? Oh gosh, we lost Raul again. So there's a lot of different barriers, right? We know that, and we can use these in good ways, by the way, but barriers are obstacles, right? Barriers are obstacles that get in the way. I'm going to say, it says obstacles that get in the way of achieving health goals. Sometimes these are positive, sometimes these are negative, right? And so like positive barriers are things that are like really fun that keep you from reaching your goal, right? And it's like, I could go to the gym, or I could go get go get the beers with the guys, right? Like that's a positive thing, but it results in like a negative overall like outcome. And then negative things are like unfavorable circumstances. Somebody's like, oh, I gotta go to the gym, but I'm sore already, right? Like that's a negative barrier, right? So positive barriers are barriers that prevent progress because they are socially engaging or fun, right? One thing is more fun than something else, so it pulls away our attention, right? We know that we should sit down and study, but at the same time, there's all kinds of cat videos on YouTube. You know, that's a positive but still barrier. It's a fun thing, but it affects us in a negative way. And we got negative barriers, right? Which are barriers that prevent progress because of unfavorable circumstances, right? I want to go to the gym, but I have to drive in traffic and I gotta put my shoes on, right? You gotta park, you gotta walk in. Like, those are negative barriers, right? There are unpleasant barriers in the way of a specific activity, right? So unpleasant things that keep you from wanting to do it. Now, one other common barrier that we're also going to see some biases here. Social bias. Social bias is a biased attitude toward a specific group of people or individuals, right? So this can, your social biases can affect, how you feel, right? These are your views on things like gender, age, ethnicity, race, whatever. All of those can sometimes be like social biases that can be negative obstacles for people to get into. So that can sometimes lead to different conclusions about things, right? Like sometimes, like I had like a bias towards CrossFit. Like I was like, I'm not gonna do CrossFit. Like I've had so many people who got injured doing CrossFit. And then one client who was like kind of a fan was like, well, it's kind of unfair if you've never like done it to judge it so harshly. And I was like, it's a very fair thing to say. Okay, and so I signed up and I had a really good time. I watched a guy rupture his calf because it sort of confirmed some of my own biases that I already had. But at the same time, like I had a lot of fun doing it, So now my, original viewpoint is CrossFit is stupid. My new viewpoint is, CrossFit is fine as long as it's performed the way you're supposed to perform it, Now I do believe that they have some work to do. I got to be totally fair. Like I said, I had a blast. It's really fun. But I think that it fosters a competitive environment, which is not a very safe environment when it comes to working out, because people get wrapped up in their own. They start doing ego lifting, We're like, well, that guy's lifting this much. I'm going to try to, and then all of a sudden they tear their shoulder, So that's like a bias that you're going to have. Then it can prevent you from doing things, People who are like, well, I heard running is bad for you. Or like, oh, runners don't have the body that I want to have, right? It's like, well, to be fair, like, you're not going to be like a professional runner, or like women who, there's a common one, they'll say they're afraid of like bulking up, right? That's like a social bias, right? Like they don't want to bulk up. And so they're afraid of like touching weights and stuff. And it's like, no, like that's totally inaccurate. And also like, that's not how that works. And, there are tons of examples out there of, women who like have incredible success because of like weight training. So we can kind of help break down those social biases. There's also another barrier, which is going to be just like peer pressure, right? So peer pressure is a classic example of like social bias, right? Which is an individual influenced to adopt behaviors in order to fit into a group, right? So peer pressure is like you are feeling pressure from outside sources. Again, these are all things that we know kind of exist, right? We can use peer pressure in a really positive way. We want to use it to be like, hey, we're here at the gym, like, are you on your way? We're excited to have you, and they're like, oh, they're excited to have me. Oh, crap, like, I got to get there, That's the good type of peer pressure. At least as long as it results in like, good outcomes. So when it comes to this, right, we know that some things that impede exercise progress are often like inactive lifestyles, unhealthy habits. Sometimes it's financial stress, or maybe it's like the role that you have in like your life. Maybe you are like a caretaker for others, and so you spend so much time taking care of everybody else that you don't have time to take care of yourself. Or maybe you just come from like a social influence of a generally sedentary lifestyle, right? All of those things are really, really common. And so when we're trying to adopt healthy behaviors, we've got a couple like norms that we've kind of presented out there, right? We have the physical activity recommendations, that classic 150 minutes of exercise per week, like low intensity, right? Just go walking 150 minutes per week. It's been shown to have incredibly positive effects. Or if you can't find 150 minutes, well, then don't make it a walk, make it a jog and do 75 minutes. 75 minutes of moderate to high intensity has also been shown to be very effective. That's 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, or 15 minutes a day, 5 days a week. That's not too bad, And then we have dietary guidelines, try to make sure that you're getting half of your plate being fruits and vegetables, quarter of your plate being like grains, quarter of your plate being like lean proteins. The more common we make being active and eating healthy, the more common we make those things like social norms, the more likely we are to have an overall like positively healthy world where people are, engaging in healthy activities. And that's better for all of us, So we're just trying to enhance those things by being it's sort of like, be the change you want to see in the world, eat healthy, be active, and encourage others to do the same. So when we're looking at this, right, some of the things we're going to see is what's called social cognitive theory. The idea behind social cognitive theory is basically just how people learn behaviors. Like this describes like how you developed your personality. This is how you became the person that you are. Some of it is going to be certain personal factors. A lot of it is going to be your environment, and a lot of it is going to be your behaviors, right? And they all feed into each other. Your behavior is going to be affected by your environment. Your behavior is also going to affect your environment. Personal factors, the things that make you unique, are going to affect your behavior, but they're also going to affect, so these are all kind of tied together here. So environmental factors are things like your social and physical environments, I come from a place where it rains all the time, so I like the rain more than I like sun. That's a environmental factor that influences my behaviors, right? How you tend to think about things or affected by things, or even just biological aspects. We all know somebody who might have like some type of chronic pain of some type that can change your outlook on things. And so you are more likely to, avoid things that are going to cause that pain. That's a personal factor, right? We definitely know things that are, whoops, God dang it. We know the things that are affected by this are going to be things like our self-efficacy, right? The belief in one's ability to perform a specific task, right? So like your self-efficacy is your ability to, you believe that you can accomplish or do something. I have done a 24-inch box jump plenty of times, so I have plenty of efficacy in my belief to do 24-inch jump. And maybe somebody else actually has that ability too, but then you take them to it and they're like, man, that's really high. I don't know if I can jump that high. And then you see them do that squat jump thing where they're like, nope. They kind of bail out for a second, right? And they kind of have to like think about it over and over again. They have low levels of self-efficacy. So we have to build that efficacy up and say, you've got this, right? Maybe we use imagery actually to kind of help them imagine themselves doing it. And then modeling is another one, right? Modeling is another big part of this. And so modeling, is that right? Pursuing healthy behaviors easily observable by role models, right? And so this is where like, you find your favorite YouTuber, you find your favorite Instagram person, and like, you try to like model and do the same things that they do. That's kind of cool. Like I love finding, pro ultimate players who do like, they're like, here's my warm up for ultimate. I'm like, I can write a warm up like that. But I love seeing it's like, this guy's a pro. I'm going to try this, you know? And a lot of times, like, I'll throw my own twist on it and sort of modify it in a certain way. But it's like, you know, I'll do 5 throws this way and 5 throws this way, and I'll do inside outs and scoobers and all these different unique throws and stuff. And it's like, okay, great. Like, I'll bet if I implement that regularly, I can get to that level. You know, I admire this person, so I'm going to try and, you know, do the same thing. This is why you know, magazines always have like, you know, check out, you know, Beyonce's workout routine. And everyone's like, oh, I'm going to do that, you know, like Beyonce. So then we also have self-regulation. This is another one of our really great tools here, which is the skills, knowledge, and resources that are acquired to enable positive changes, right? So you are just continually reminding yourself to set goals, teaching yourself how to like self-monitor through like journaling, written feedback. Oh, developing a reward system is huge. This is really cool. Develop a reward system. So that's always a big one. So like just coming up with the ability to like, okay, I know that if I do this, I'm going to get that, right? And then you're like, you develop this like social influence over someone, right? Or even just motivational self-talk, right? Building up their confidence by like teaching someone how to sort of talk to themselves in a really positive way. So there's some kind of fun versions of things that we can do here. There's sort of 3 sort of common social techniques that we can use to sort of enhance our clients' adherence here. And so one of them is called the foot in the door technique, which is basically where you ask a series of requests with very small demands. And then that actually sort of like get somebody in the mood to, they'll be more likely to help you. So if you're like trying to get your client to do something really large, you ask them to do something very small over and over again, and it sort of builds, and they're like, okay, and they get used to saying yes. Then there's the exact opposite version, which is called the door in the face technique. The door in the face technique is making a ridiculous, huge, giant request that your client goes, what? No, right? It's like, all right, I want you to bench press 600 pounds. They're like, what? I can't do that. And it's like, okay, well, what about 135? And they go, okay, fine. You know, like, oh, okay. So then you ask a much more reasonable request afterwards, which is really what you were actually trying to achieve. That was too exaggerated. I exaggerated too far. But that's the door in the face method, right? And then there's the that's not all method, which is always kind of fun. This is actually more of a, this is like a sales technique here, but it's like you make an offer sound as pleasing as possible. Be like, oh man, I can't wait. We're gonna kill the legs today. We're gonna be super sore tomorrow. You're gonna feel super accomplished. It's gonna be so good, right? And it's like, man, and tomorrow you're gonna think back on this and be like, man, I really crushed it yesterday. So that's not. It's like, not only are you gonna get this great workout, you're also gonna get all the fringe benefits that come along with it. It very much kind of feels like a sales technique. But all 3 of these are really great to kind of enhance your client's ability to kind of stick to that program. So things that we need to do, right? Make sure you're paying attention to your client's attitude. Always make sure that like their behaviors match their attitudes as well, because sometimes people will just say things for the sake of saying them. So make sure that you're making sure that your client is like adhering to a program and that they are also enjoying it. Because if they are adhering to it, but they hate the program, eventually they're going to fall off the wagon. So we got to keep an eye out for that. We also want to be aware that, you know, we do have some like multicultural influences here that you're going to see based on like different backgrounds and stuff. We want to make sure that we are always being kind to everyone and taking into account that not everybody has the same cultural or influential background. And so like coming to common ground with people and recognizing that like some people have like different influences is huge, right? And so we will see like you know, obesity and different statistics and things like that. And understanding that like it has nothing to do with things like, you know, their actual ethnic background or anything like that. And the fact that it's like a structural background, being aware of things like that makes you, you know, you want to be much more adjusted about stuff like that. So older clients, right? It's not that older clients are enfeebled. It's that when we get older, our body physically changes in really cool, unique ways. We're going to see that, you know, in program design next module, you know. In fact, we see like a shift from type 2 to type 1 muscle fibers as we get older. And this is why like golfers in a weird way get better the older they get. You know, it's weird. Like you'll talk to like somebody who's like in their 40s and they're like, yeah, I always struggle with golf. And then they got older and they got better at it. And it's not because they get to play for longer. There was just all of a sudden this moment where this sport, you know, matched their biological capabilities. So being aware of things like that, and the fact that like, you know, none of these things are better than other versions, they're just unique, is really what we want to have to be like well adjusted, right? So interventions for whatever stage of change your client is in. If you got somebody who's in the pre-contemplation stage, social influences that you've got is just blasting things on stuff like social media, creating support systems, and finding ways to educate. And this is where, you know, if you're trying to like increase someone's awareness of something, right? Awareness of these social influences. Then we want to get them to kind of see themselves in that perspective. So maybe they talk to a friend or they start participating in some very small events that are related to activity. Or maybe they build a support system, right? In the contemplation stage, right? And then they're like, oh, well, if I see all my friends doing it, I think I can see myself doing it, right? Then if you get somebody who's in the preparation stage, they got 30 days to kind of start getting ready to get active. Maybe they've taken a few steps here and there, but they're not like fully engaged yet. Let's get them a workout partner. So it's like, okay, now that you've still like got your gym membership, we're going to pair you up with this person, right? You're going to get your workout partner. And now the two of you got to keep each other on task. And so they're less likely to kind of fall off the wagon. Or maybe you like plan like a specific event. This is saying like, volunteer at like an event and stuff. I kind of like that, but I think like a better event would just be like, you know, we're going to do another strength assessment in 30 days. We did our initial one. We're going to do another one. We got to make as much progress this month as possible. You know, I like to cater the event around my actual client rather than around an external stimulus. Action stage, you got somebody who's actually working out. This is where like now you and your workout partner can kind of develop like a more advanced plan, something to kind of stick to. Or maybe it is like, all right, let's sign up for that fun run. Let's, you know, engage in that 5K. Or maybe you set up a challenge. That's always a fun one. Like I love to set up like a little bit of fun competition between my clients. I do it all the time. And so like we'll get everybody joined in on the same like Fitbit group, and everybody can see how many minutes of exercise they got per week. It's always kind of a fun competition. And inevitably there's just one person who takes it way too far. And they're like, I exercised for 90 hours this week. You know, it's like, good Lord. But in a way, that's kind of a good thing, because then like they get a reputation and everybody's like, I got to be like Eden over here. Then you got the maintenance stage, right? And this is where like, one of the best things you can do for social influences, for keeping someone on task, if they're in the maintenance stage, get them to involve somebody else. Get them to tell their story. You know, have them teach someone else. There's no better way to learn advanced techniques than to teach. And so like if you can get a client to like maybe even just like lead a small part of a group exercise class, I love stuff like that. If I've got somebody who I know is in maintenance and I'm teaching a boot camp, for instance, I will use them as my demo body consistently. I'll be like, all right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna do some body weight prisoner squats. Steve, why don't you come over here? And it's like, all right, so he's gonna put his hands behind his head and he's gonna squat down, he's gonna drive his knees out while keeping his knees over his toe and sitting back as if he's sitting into a chair. And so like I'm having him demo it. I could totally demo it. I could totally do that myself. But by getting him like more involved, you know, he's like taking a little more ownership and he's like becoming a leader in this situation. And that can keep him, it's like, well, now he wants to do like more advanced things. And it's like, all of a sudden one day he's like, now I want to be a trainer. It's like, awesome. You know, like, hell yeah, you do. So that is our social influences. Really, this one's just going to come down to you what they really want you out of this chapter, the big takeaway, and when you read the chapter, you'll kind of feel this. They want you to take away the fact that like you have a lot of influence over your clients, and you can help build that influence by using other clients or other social influences, and you can do that to create really positive change. You're a more powerful tool sometimes than you realize. I think it's sort of the takeaway message. You'll know what I'm talking about when you go through the reading. But that is about all I've got for you guys today. Homework number 4, or that. Homework number 3 is going to go up today on Canvas, so you guys can find your way over there. I'm going to get it up a little. I'm going to try to prioritize getting that up quickly today, so you guys can find that and sort of study for it for tomorrow's final and stuff. But Robert, Nicholas, you guys have any questions today? I know it's kind of a lot. We had to do 2 PowerPoints today, but you have any questions or comments? Anything you're worried about?
No, I'm good.
Feeling good? Nicholas?
No.
All
I'll
right.
just probably go over it a little bit.
Yeah, I was on a kind of a lightning fast pace today. So if there's anything you need to re-go over, let me know. Shoot me a text, You're always welcome to be like, hey man, you said this. Did you mean that? Every now and then, I'll get going ahead of myself and I'll say something and somebody will be like, hey, when you said this, and I'm like, did I say that? So please feel free to, always clarify.
Yeah,
But other than that, I'll go ahead and kill the recording and see you guys tomorrow.